Well, hello everyone. Deathwalker Paula here. And not too long ago, maybe 6 months ago or so, I had done a podcast about body donation. And it received so many requests and questions. And anyway, so it's come full circle. And I wanted to sit down today and I wanted to just do a follow up on that particular conversation that I had on my podcast, but I thought I would just come on here and do a small video instead. So the podcast was actually called When Autonomy Meets Reality: How Body Donation Decisions Are Actually Navigated After Death. And so we're going to go ahead and start there. I wrote some notes and I have some questions that I had put down so that I can stay on point and kind of run through this with as much clarity as well as not taking up too much of your time. Why this follow-up matters. Like I said, after my last piece, there were just so many questions and my inbox just filled up with so many posts, I guess. And they weren't all fearful this time or anything like that. They were gung-ho down in the muck trying to figure out if this was a viable solution for their end-of-life choices. A lot of people saw the tension that I named, the space between what a dying person chooses and what actually happens after death seems to be one of the sticklers that people were most interested in. There's when family dynamics and institutional processes come into play, and then the legal frameworks, it all collides. And so it makes it muddled, and it can be a very intense journey to actually put it into place and get it done. Excuse me. One of my readers, I think they said it plainly, and this is what they said. What stood out to me most was the tension you highlighted between individual autonomy and the realities that can shape what happens after death. What safeguards exist? What are the gaps? How do we make sure our wishes are respected? All very, very viable and very, very clear and precise questions asked. When they ask questions like this, it really is for me about clarity, honesty. And when you have honesty, you automatically have clarity. When you have avoidance, you have confusion. So this is what I consider the heart of the matter. This is where I consider autonomy is either upheld or it's just quietly undone off to the sides like some sort of scene prop going on. So let's just go ahead and walk right into the terrain that I want to discuss. One of the key things is the moment when autonomy meets the real world. I mean, when you have it on a piece of paper and you have it outlined how you'd like, that's one particular energy. But when you actually die and it is implemented and that energy is then turned into momentum and it's about your autonomy, then that's when the two clash. That's when it becomes, well, almost magnetic, repulsing each other, or repelling each other is a better word. Excuse me on that. So a person can make a sovereign decision. They can choose body donation, cremation, burial, green burial, home funeral. But the moment they die, the choice enters a system that is shaped by family emotion, medical protocols, legal requirements, institutional timelines are a big one, paperwork accuracy, that's another big, big, big one. So pay attention. Be present, and being present is a skill when it comes to these kind of end-of-life decisions. And if you haven't honed that skill, then I highly suggest that you find someone who has honed that skill, who has a light, an essence of knowing what being present is about, what bringing presence is about. There's transportation logistics as well. And believe it or not, in this country, we have state by state rules. So there are 50 states, so you can only imagine what it's going to be from each state to the next. And that's where the transportation logistics get really messed up. One of the things that happen is overwhelmed people often default to fear, urgency, confusion, what we've always done, what the hospital told us to do, what feels easiest right now. These are all things that I hear a lot. When I hear these, I absolutely know that they are overwhelmed, that they are in confusion. So when all this stuff takes place, this is how the sovereignty and the autonomy choices get overridden, because confusion and chaos comes in. Not always maliciously, mind you. I don't believe it's done maliciously 99.9% of the time, but it is a systematic momentum, and that is something that is harmful as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what safeguards actually exist when it comes to body donation. These are protections, and I will say they vary widely, again, because we have 50 states, and every state wants to have their own little ego-bound questions and protocols. So that's where we are. Number one, you must have a signed body donation consent form. You must have that. And then if you register with a whole body donation program and you sign the consent themselves, that document carries legal weight. So if you're a dying person set up with the whole body donation company or entity, if you will, and they specifically signed the papers, they did not have a representative, they weren't past the point of being able to put their signature on the line, then that document carries massive legal weight. In most states, even a family can't override it. So that's the clarity that I want to say on that one. Advance directives and final disposition documents. This is a subject that is broad, so I'm just going to basically talk about the body donation part in this advance directive section. These are legally binding in most states, but they must explicitly state these things: the chosen method of disposition, the chosen donation program, who has authority and who does not have authority. So all this has to be entered into your advance directive. The third thing we're going to talk about is state laws protecting the decedent's wishes. Okay, some states have very strong protections, and others leave room for the family to override, or maybe an institution wants to override it. So there are, as much as I want to say the state laws are protecting the dead, there's many that don't. There's many that still believe they are not the most important person in the room. They still believe that somehow the family or institutions or religion or politics or whatever it is gets to be a part of their end-of-life choice, like it's some sort of community project. So that number 3, be careful with that, because it doesn't always align. Program-specific protocols. Reputable donation programs have the following. They have a 24/7 intake. They have rapid transport. They have a clear chain of custody. They have strict ethical guidelines, and they reduce the chance of interference. If you pick a donation-specific entity and they are reputable and they have done everything right in their mission, in their sole purpose, their calling, and again, this all aligns into a very nice energy that moves that moves slowly. It goes with the flow. Now we're going to talk about the other side. We're going to talk about where the gaps in this process still exist. And this is where the truth kind of gets uncomfortable, but it is necessary because remember I told you early, honesty equals clarity to me. So first of all, families can still interfere in the practice. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. Even if they cannot legally override, they can delay paperwork. They can refuse to call the program. They can insist on a funeral home. They can pressure hospital staff and institutional staff. They can claim the person changed their mind. So again, you go back to the very first thing that I said. When you are able, the dying person, to sign the whole donation consent form, then it is extremely hard for a lot of that stuff to bypass. Something you should know, hospitals often defer to the loudest voice in the room. Period. So keep that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about who and what you want to put in your advance directive. Hospitals, they are not required to facilitate body donation. That is something that is up to the person who has been designated to take care of this. They are required to facilitate organ donation. Now, that's a totally different thing than whole body donation, and I'll do one of those at another later date. But this is a massive gap between the organ donation and not whole body donation. So they kind of leave that hanging, you know what I'm saying? It's just a hanging fruit that they're not willing to touch. And it's a massive gap. It can cause delays. It can allow the paperwork delays. It can allow all that energy in that will create an imbalance and that won't be aligned to the sovereignty and autonomy of what the decedent wanted for their end-of-life wishes. Many people don't know their rights when it comes to this. I found out that most people they don't even know how a bill becomes a law. So I'm going to just go ahead and say that's okay if you don't know your rights on this one. But most families, they often assume they must embalm. That's not true. You are under no obligation legally to embalm someone who is going to have a whole body donation. They think you have to purchase a casket. No, you don't have to do that either. I mean, you can purchase a casket and put it in the ground for, a tribute or a memorial, but it's not something that comes along with the whole body donation of making you buy a casket. You don't even have to use a funeral home. They can come straight to the home where the decedent died. And the inter ashes kind of thing. None of this is legally required. So these are the most important ones that I can state to you, that these are your rights. Paperwork errors can void a donation. And I told you one of the things was doing the paperwork correctly. This is something that needs to be focused on, mindfully done, and go at a slow pace so that you make sure every I is dotted, every T is crossed. Leave nothing undone. The wrong name of the spelling. That's a big one right off the bat. Missing signatures. Missing initials on boxes that you were supposed to initial by. You didn't put a next of kin contact. And you had no backup plan. Always remember that when you're dealing with whole body donation, yes, more than likely the body is going to be accepted. However, there are times, and I have come across one, maybe two in my 30 years of doing this, where the whole donation entity that signed the decedent up either fell apart and were no longer in business, And the other one was simply that it was a time in a certain era where they had an abundance of body donations and they just didn't require this. So have a backup plan. There are several. There's Science Care, there's United Tissue Network. Make sure you have a second backup to make sure that it's covered. Autonomy can be undone by a simple clerical error. So keep that in mind. I guess the last thing that we'll kind of go over here is how to ensure your wishes are respected. Well, this is the part that I found most people grasping for. And the best I can tell you is when you do your advance directive, when you set up your end-of-life choices, pick the person who's going to walk with you, to be by your side. Pick someone who has no dog in your race. Pick someone who is completely about you. They have no extra baggage. They have no, like I said, no dog in your race. And that usually means eliminating a lot of the family members. So that's the best thing that I can put up there right now. So the other things that I can tell you just to kind of do as, as part of the ritual of doing this is register with the body donation while you're alive, man. While you're in full faculty of your brain and your thoughts, and your hand can still sign your name or make an X, whatever it is that you do. Do not wait until you're in hospice to get it done, or wait until someone dies and then says, oh yeah, can you come pick up the body? I'm donating. No, there is a alignment. There is a balance in doing this. You don't do that when you have a funeral, right? You've picked out your caskets, and you've made the flowers and everything. So, and don't assume that a family member is going to figure it out, because chances are they're not going to. If it hasn't already been touched on, then that's a key sign right there. Tell your family clearly, repeatedly, and without apology. That's the most important. Do not apologize for this choice that you are making. There is no apology needed. It is a beautiful and wondrous thing to want to give your whole body to donation for generations to learn from. Perhaps discoveries will be made. It's a wonderful way to make sure, even from an environmental footprint, it's just a beautiful way to go. Don't tell them in a suggested form, oh, I'm thinking of, no, tell them this is what we're doing. This is a declaration that I am making right now. Like I said, put it in your advance directive. Use the exact language that's required by your state. And if you don't have someone who's doing your advance directive that knows the exact language, find someone. Name a disposition agent that you trust. I told you this the very first when I introduced this section. Find your person. Because the person that you put in charge at the end of your life should be all about you. And if they leave the situation and no one knows their name, then that was a really good death. Because the dying person is the most important person in the room. Period. Keep copies everywhere. Take pictures of some places will give you a certificate stating the descendant's name or the person who's going to do the whole body donation, and it's a certificate welcoming them abroad. Take pictures of all the legal papers you do. Ask them to send copies in your email. Send these out to multiple people. Print a couple out. Put them in your end-of-life book if you have one. Make sure there are copies everywhere. Make sure there's copies in your wallet, maybe in your, in your day planner. Make sure they're even in your phone if you can. Keep them on the fridge. Keep them in your wallet with your doctor. Make sure your primary and your hospital closest to you has a copy of that whole body donation. Very, very important. And make sure that when you get into palliative care or hospice care, that both your teams also know that's what's going to happen. We talked about this. Choose a program with strong protocols. Understand what will happen with the ashes. For example, I use the United Tissue Network, and they're going to scatter my partner's ashes 200 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a legal, ethical, and a very respectful, deeply return to earth and water. And so that's what we have intended to do. How these decisions are navigated in practice. When the death is pronounced, a nurse, a doctor, or a hospice person confirms the time of death. Then the family or agent, if you have a death doula or somebody, outside of that, they call the donation program. This is the most critical step. If no one calls, nothing happens. So make sure someone is in charge of calling the body donation company. The program screens the case. They confirm the cause of death, the location, the paperwork, the medical history, and the transport availability. Then, once all those are done in the order that I just said, the transportation arrives. This can be within hours, this can be within minutes, just depending on the situation itself. Speed matters though. Decomposition affects acceptance. Remember that. It is about speed. The longer the body stays unattained and it starts to decompose, the more likely that it is possible that you will be rejected by the program to take that body. Then the body enters the program's custody. It's like, when you're turning over the chain of command kind of deal. And the chain of custody, therefore, then begins. This protects the donor's dignity and the family's trust. Then, about 6 weeks later, the final step in this is the family or whoever it is in charge will receive the ashes weeks later. Let me say that again, weeks later. It's not a quick process. Normally it takes between 5 and 7 weeks to get this done. Or in some programs, like I mentioned, the ashes are scattered on the family's behalf. So this is where autonomy either holds or it breaks, truthfully. Why this matters for autonomy? Because autonomy is not just a belief, folks. It's not just a value. It's not just a preference. Autonomy is a practice. And a practice that must be documented, communicated, protected, witnessed, and upheld. All this must take place in order for this to be real, for this to actually come to pass. And this is so important, especially when the person who made the choice is no longer here to defend it. So, come on, step it up. The final truth, autonomy for me does not end at death, but it does become more fragile. The dying person's sovereignty is only as strong as the clarity of their documents, the courage of their advocates, the integrity of the institutions involved, and the willingness of the living to honor what was chosen. This is the work that needs to be done. This is the responsibility and the accountability. This is what I like to call the threshold where love actually becomes action. And this is where to me is where we, the living, we need to do better. We need to rise. Rise, rise, rise. And on that, my kind and beloved fellow human beings, I'm going to say have a wonderful weekend and be blessed. And remember, honesty is clarity. Avoidance is confusion, especially when it comes to death. Be well.